Hello and welcome to the Arteries. We're a weekly podcast where we talk with artists and try to understand how and why they make art. I'm your host, Noël Duplaa. This week, I'm sitting down with musician Dave Newell, a veteran of many bands. He's currently playing with Punchface Champions and Not Monsters. We talked about his dad learning to play bass to bond with him being a formative experience, his unlikely musical bedrock of Queen and Michael Jackson, and the art of messing with songs until they're interesting and you look awesome. So here's me talking to Dave Newell. Yeah, let's go back to the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
I was born, obviously, after I was born, I lived in Leixlip till I was just about 5 years old. And then we moved to Scotland. I lived in 3 different places in Scotland. We moved to Prestwick, which is apparently very famous for golf.
Right.
And we lived there for a couple of years and then moved to Troon, which is apparently very famous for golf. But when my mum and dad separated while we were over there and we moved back. I guess my answer is usually Beaumont because it's the longest I ever spent in a place in my youth.
And when your parents initially separated, your dad was still living over in the UK?
My dad lived in, only for a good bit less than a year, maybe 6 to 8 months.
Okay.
He stayed. We moved quite suddenly back, and he followed a while later, just to be near his kids, you know. Yeah. And my mum and dad have been separated ever since, but they're okay with each other, and that's all cool. And we see lots of my dad, and it was as pain free as it can be in that situation, you know.
And in terms of music, when you're growing up, did your dad have a musical background, or?
Basically, I decided I wanted to play music myself, and he didn't play an instrument. No, he was a huge fan of lots of great music, and that probably had something to do with it. But it was actually after I decided I wanted to play music, he decided he was going to play music too. Okay. Which I think was kind of this is a way I can bond with my son kind of thing. Yeah. So he actually took up an instrument shortly after I did. Okay. He took up the bass quite soon, very soon after I kind of started to develop an interest in it, and it became something that we kind of had together, which was pretty cool. Yeah.
And you were learning the bass at the time?
Myself and my 2 cousins, who were kind of my 2 best friends growing up and everything, decided we wanted to form a band before any of us could play an instrument. And my recollection of it is essentially that based on the order of our birthdays, that's what decided what instruments each of us would play. Yeah. Because when you're young, your birthday and Christmas are the times you get gifts. Right. And you don't have any money to buy things. So John, the eldest, was born in June. So June rolls around and he's like, I want a guitar. And then Simon was born in August, and August rolls around and he wants a keyboard. So I'm left with drums or bass, and there's no way I'm getting a drum kit. Like, we lived in a small little house at the time, just me, my mum and my sister. So yeah, I ended up with a bass. But what my dad's whole thing was, he always kind of wanted me to earn it. So he said, I'm going to buy you the most basic classical acoustic guitar, and if you show me that that you're into it and you stick with it, then I'll buy you a bass. And I think it was October which is my birthday, he bought the classical, and by Christmas I had a bass. Because like 2 months later he was like, okay, you haven't just ditched this, so I can see you want to do it. And in fairness, if you hadn't have done it at Christmas, I would have had to wait till next October. So that would have been a bit harsh to wait a year. So that's I started on the bass, but I also kept up the classical guitar that he'd originally got me, and took a shine to that. And I think by the following birthday it was electric guitar. And then as I kind of got a little older and got pocket money, I'd be like going into, I remember on stage music at the back of the Jervis. Okay. They always used to have like loads of secondhand, like real dodgy shit, but like all I could afford at the time. So buying like a Boss Metal Zone and, all that kind of, and like, okay, if I plug this Metal Zone into this poxy little bass amp, all of a sudden I sound like a badass,
musically, where did you start off? Like, what's...
One of the first albums I ever remember getting, and this is super lame, is for one Christmas I was obsessed with the Gladiators TV show.
Yeah.
But my mum bought me the soundtrack for the Gladiators TV
Awesome.
show. But for however stupid the show was, there was actually some banging tunes on that soundtrack.
Yeah.
I mean, there was War, Edmund Starr. There was the Cats in the Cradle cover by Ugly Kid Joe. There was some really rocking tunes. I think The Boys Are Back in Town was on it as well. And bear in mind that at that point I was living in Scotland, so I wasn't being brought up on Thin Lizzy like all the other Dublin kids. You know?
Yeah.
But I was taken out of Dublin at 5 and back at 10. And I'm listening to it one day in my room, and my mum comes in and goes, "You're listening to Thin Lizzy?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Yeah, I used to know Phil Lynott. Like, I danced with him a bunch of times. Dino's Bar and Grill was around the corner from our home." And I was like, "What the fuck?" I didn't even know they were Irish. But yeah, I the first artist I can remember being really, really obsessed with was Michael Jackson. Like when I was like 5 or 6 or 7 years old. I was crazy into Michael Jackson, and then realized that all the other kids weren't, and that must mean I was lame, so I just stopped. But I remember while living in Scotland, I can't even remember what the song it was, but I was obsessed with a particular tune, and one day I was waiting for it to play on the radio so I could record it onto a cassette so I could have it.
I remember that.
And I stole a cassette tape from my dad's collection and recorded over it, and only recorded this one tune. So I used to play this tune to death, but every so often, I'd be doing something while I was playing the tune, and the tune would end, and then it would go back to the thing that was previously on the cassette.
Yeah.
And it was Bowie. And I got into Bowie, and then my favorite tune on this particular Bowie cassette, which was probably like some sort of best of, was Under Pressure, the Queen tune.
Yeah.
Which I think was on a Queen album and the Bowie album at the time.
Yeah.
So then I got really into Queen, and Queen, I think Queen are amazing, man. Even still now, like I in work every so often I'll put on a Queen record and be like, wow, they did this, like, and they didn't do it with Pro Tools or anything. Like, they just played the shit out of it.
Yeah.
Like it's these days the things you can do. I mean, it's great, but those 4 dudes are all just absolutely elite players, and they just did it in a room. And it's crazy,
But then I suppose, were you learning any Queen songs on the guitar, or?
That's probably a bit before we got to playing music. When we started playing, it was Oasis and all that Britpop kind of stuff,
Right.
wasn't it? And that's really handy when you're trying to learn to play. And the bands that are popular at the time have such basic songs that within a couple of weeks of starting, you're able to play some of your heroes' songs. That is such a motivator to keep going. You're like, I'm getting really good. I can already play this Oasis tune. And actually, it's more that they're not very good. But at the time, you don't realize that. So you're like, I'm doing really well at this. Like, maybe I have a real skill for this. And anybody can play an Oasis song, but I didn't know that at the time.
I think there's an entire generation of guitarists who started with just that.
Massively, yeah.
Basically sitting down for 2 weeks and suddenly you can play 2 albums worth of songs you really like.
And the thing is, as much as, Oasis aren't exactly, individually amazing musicians, they wrote great tunes.
Oh, yeah.
I'll still say that. They stand the test of time. Like, simple songs, simple chord sequences. But I always say, that it's, anybody can play those songs, but not anyone can write them.
Yeah.
And that's where the skill is in the writing with that stuff, The fact that they're anthems 10 years later and people still sing them, that says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, there's a phrase that in the early Punchface days, there was a phrase. We don't so much say it anymore. We definitely still do it, where we would work on something in the jam room and we'd get a general gist of what we're doing and maybe a working structure, which might later get torn apart.
Yeah.
But we'd play through and we'd like, okay, cool. And we'd all look at each other and the phrase would be, Now, how can we fuck with this? One thing we all have in common is we take the piss out of ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, we'll actually like, oh yeah, like this stupid, shitty fucking band that we play in or whatever, you know. And we're all pretty comfortable in saying that, like, you know, we're pretty decent musicians, but we're not the best musicians in the world by any means. But one thing is that if you fuck with something and if it stops being just a standard thing, and maybe you fuck with timing, or when you're working on structure, you go with something that's a bit different to what everyone else does.
Yeah.
If you're able to play that right and play it well, and it's weird enough, because it's not what people expect, they think you're amazing players.
Yeah.
And you're really just well rehearsed,
Yeah.
you know, like, so when it's like a straight 4/4 beat and it feels like it's going to go into that part it did before, but instead it goes into this completely different thing with a weird time signature that they're not expecting, they're like, whoa, these guys are totally out there and mad. And it's actually just, we originally wrote that obvious thing that you thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the practice, we went, how can we fuck with it?
Yeah.
And the how can we fuck with it is why I'm not saying everybody thinks we're amazing, but it's why the people who do think we're good, it's why they think we're good.
Yeah.
You know, it's great doing something that people don't think is going to happen. And it's watching people in a crowd when you're playing, and they think I'm not saying like that they're aware of it, but they're nodding along thinking, I know what's going to happen here, and then you do something different, and watching their head readjust, like their neck readjust as they're trying to headbang and going da 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 what? I'm just trying to adjust their head. Why am I not in time anymore? What's happening? And it just takes a couple of seconds, and then they're back into the nod. But I get a kick out of that. Just making people look like they're having a tiny stroke.
That's the dream.
Yeah.
Okay, so
we do love the Strokes.
The band, the first band, the band with your cousins.
Oh, God damn it.
Yeah. Why?
You're going to ask me what they were called, aren't you?
Were they Surreal Dream?
They were fucking surreal. Well, okay, so, man, it's actually worse than it seems, because there was a couple of names. Because, right, so we were Surreal Dream, yeah. And then myself and Simon went to college together in the Ballyfermot Rock School. Surreal Dream was me, John, Simon, and then we found this guy called Brian in the college who played the drums.
Okay.
But in the college, it was a 3-piece, and outside of college, it was a 4-piece, because John wasn't allowed to play in the college. So first of all, we changed the name in the college to a 3-piece, and then because we started playing a couple of shows within the college and people got to know that name, we just changed the name outside of the college to the same name. So Surreal Dream became Purple is a Fruit. Like, I would need a lot of time to figure out which of those is a shittier name. Because they're both dreadful names.
They're both pretty bad.
But that only lasted, well, you gotta remember, like, that band with John and Simon, we started probably I would have been age, I'm gonna say 13 maybe. And of course, by the time I was in college, I'm like 18 or 19, we were kind of starting to grow out of that. And obviously also being in an environment surrounded by other musicians, you're going to start meeting other musicians and start jamming with them, and all of a sudden this is fresh and new and exciting. So I was kind of, after first year in college, that all kind of died a death, and I formed a new band with guys in the college, and we called that band Aristocrat.
Okay.
Yeah, which I still think is a kind of baller name. I don't know. I like that as a name. I think it was we just started jamming when the movie The Aristocrats came out in the cinema. Myself and the guitar player went to see that movie in the cinema.
Oh, there was a 4-piece, was it?
It was a 4-piece. It was myself and Chris on guitar, and then I was writing the songs and playing guitar and singing. Then Chris on guitar, and Shane, who later was Shane of CFIT with you.
You went to college with you?
Yeah, me and Shane became best mates in college.
Right.
And have been ever since. Shane was playing in a different band with Jacob. It was kind of obvious, like, our bass player plays with this guy, and, you know, if you want your rhythm section to be good, if they've been playing together for years, that's a pretty handy thing.
learned how to be honest with myself. It was little to no help. I lost some friends, I lost some family. Like car windows swapping scenery, I think I may have started losing days.
As I've got older, I guess this is something maybe specific to me or to a certain type of person, but because of where I work and where I live and the fact that I'm right in the heart of the city and really know a hell of a lot of people in the music scene in Dublin. You know, I know everybody. If I go to a gig, I'm definitely going to see people I know.
Yeah.
And it's so vibrant, and there's so many great bands, and I'm such a fan of so many of those bands that my motivation at this point is every time we write something, perform something, or release something, I'm thinking about, I want all those people to be like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You know? Because that's how I feel about them. Like if I go and watch New Secret Weapon or Race the Flux or whoever else and watch them play and go, man, that's fucking awesome. You know, just on a base level, because I respect all these bands, I want them to do that when they see us. And I guess that's fundamentally one of my main motivations. I want the musicians who I think are awesome to think I'm awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty blunt, but it's true. Yeah. I don't really think about the money side of it anymore. I mean, on a basic level, what I learned with the first Punchface release was you go, you record, you pay for a studio, you pay for mastering, you pay for the actual duplication of records / CDs, whatever. And then if you can go and have a launch and get a good price for the room, maybe call in some favors, and if you go and play a gig and get enough people to go, you can break even that night, and then everything else is a bonus. Like we have a shitload of records left over from that, but we made money on that release. Not a huge amount, but enough for us to go, cool, well, we can do that again and not be too worried.
And do you think, I mean,
an afterthought, just to be clear. Like the money thing is an afterthought, but it's like, okay, I want to do this and I want it to be awesome and I want people to like it. And then just as an afterthought, it's like, oh, how much is it going to be? Yeah, that much. Okay. And how much is that? Yeah, that much. So that adds up to that much. I reckon we can do that. That's grand. You know, that's just a lot, kind of total afterthought at the end of it all.
How useful is Ireland in pushing bands forward?
Not very. I don't think. I mean, what is there? Like, I mean, there's not a lot of places you can go for help. There's not a lot of people you can talk to, or there's certainly no financial back. I mean, the record label as a entity barely even exists anymore. And but the flip side of that is, I mean, obviously on the whole, that's a shame. But this might sound mean, but there's a part of me that sees a good in that, because it means that the only people doing this are people who really want to do this, you know, play music. You know, it gets rid of a lot of the posers and the people who aren't truly into it. You know, if it was easy, everyone would do it. And the fact that it's not maybe filters out a lot of the crap. In terms of selling your stuff, this is where it's a shame. To be honest, it feels to me like most people, this is more of a Dublin comment than an Ireland comment, because you know, the shows we've played outside of Dublin, I think it's a bit different. But in Dublin, people do not want to pay. They don't want to pay to watch the band, and they don't want to pay for an album or an EP or a t-shirt or whatever. They just don't. They expect everything to be free.
Yeah.
It's a shame. It's short-sighted. They don't realize the work and the financial commitment that a band makes, or they don't care. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they're people don't want to pay to go to a gig, and they don't want to pay for your product. They expect to download your music for free and watch your band for free, which sucks.
Yeah.
In outside of Dublin, maybe it's a sympathy thing, or maybe it's just a different outlook. You know, I'm such a city guy that maybe I'd say they're a little backward and don't realize that the changes that are going on. Yeah. Maybe they'll become like Dublin is in a couple of years' time. But like, definitely, like we went out to Galway recently and sold a shitload of merch. You know, like it definitely feels like people are more willing to spend money down there. Maybe part of it's like, thanks for coming here.
Yeah.
You know, we realize you came here, you went out of your way to come here, and we want you to do it again. We want bands to come here.
Yeah. And
the way to do it is by supporting them. Maybe it's that. Maybe there's just a different mindset there. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely different outside of Dublin to me. I don't remember the last time we played a show outside of Dublin where we didn't sell a couple of things. Sometimes we sell loads, sometimes just a couple, but always something. Whereas there's plenty of times you'll play a Dublin show and sell nothing.
Yeah,
you know?
I remember there was a gig.
Plus, sorry to cut across you,
no,
but the other side of that as well is that you play a show in a venue in outside of Dublin. The venue is kind of expecting to pay you, which is crazy in comparison to Dublin. They're expecting to pay you. They'll usually throw you a few drinks. They might feed you. Sometimes they'll find you somewhere to stay. Whereas in Dublin, it's like nothing, absolutely nothing. Like, unless you really have to, drive that to make anything happen for yourself in Dublin. Yeah. I mean,
is that to do with an overflow of bands?
There's more bands, there's more venues. There's definitely, I think fundamentally, in Dublin, the attitude is the venue thinks that the band needs the venue more than the venue needs the band.
Yeah.
Whereas outside of Dublin, the venue's like, we need the band more than the band need us.
Yeah.
For right or wrong, I'm not necessarily saying anyone's correct in this. But
yeah.
That's the way I think they see it.
I think to an extent as well, it's because music for a lot of people, music which was really at the forefront for a long time, music has become backgroundy for a lot of people.
Yeah. There's also and this is, I think, maybe the point you were making, is that, you know, in Dublin, if you're talking to a venue and they're like, and you ask for money and they go, we're not going to give you money, and you go, well, we're not going to play it without a couple of quid, they'll go, cool, there's plenty of others who will.
Yeah.
Whereas it's a different scenario when you're for a Dublin band, leaving Dublin and going somewhere else is a different scenario, because the somewhere else knows that you have to spend money to get there.
Yeah.
There are certain things that you can't get out of, like you have to pay for petrol, you have to often you'll have to stay because it's physically impossible to get there and back and play a show in the same night, you know, and if you can't, if you do have to get back, that's more petrol. Well, it's more petrol either way, whether you stay or not.
Yeah.
And people have to eat, you know, so they understand that you're incurring a certain amount of cost playing their venue, and that if they want bands to play their venue, they have to pay them, unless they just stick with local bands. And in Dublin, there's a million bands within a 1 mile radius, whereas in let's say if we're going down to play Dolan's or something like that, they can either get bands to come from afar and pay them, or they can only have bands that play nearby, which means they probably have a very small pool of bands because it's, you know, it's not a big place.
Yeah. There's
only so many bands. So if they want a varied lineup, they have to pay for it. Whereas Dublin can have a crazy varied lineup and pay nothing.
Yeah.
And that's a fact. And it is a thing where, and everybody's as responsible, including ourselves, everybody's just as bad as each other for kind of making that happen, because it only takes one band to say, we'll play for free, for the other band who want money to be told, sorry, we got this band, we'll play for free. If everybody turned around and said, we're not doing this anymore, it would change. But that ain't going to happen, you know? And we're just as bad as everybody else. Like, we play for free when we can't get a show for money. Yeah. Because we want to play.
Yeah.
We want to play because we love playing. And why write all the songs and record them to not play them live? Why spend endless hours in a jam room with no... The gig is the reward, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
So.
And it becomes that kind of Like, not to sound like a full-on Marxist or whatever, but like the kind of capitalist system view of it is, if you're doing something and you love it, then why should you be paid for that as well? You're already loving it.
But I mean, like, there's so many contradictions in this. Like, I mean, I don't lose too much sleep over it because I can't change it.
Yeah.
It's like, if in any single band I'm in, any release we ever do, if it was only up to me and it wasn't a democracy and I was just the boss who got to decide everything, everything we'd ever record would be released on vinyl.
Yeah.
Because I love that. And I would be doing that knowing every single time that we'll lose money.
Yeah.
But I don't give a fuck. There's a romance to vinyl that I love, and I'm so proud to have a vinyl. And that's so awesome to me. Now, obviously, there's other members in the band, and there's a financial side of that, and it's not always possible. I guess the flip side is, in an ideal world, I would not have a job and I'd be able to do music all the time, and I can't because of all these things.
Yeah.
But as I say, I just don't think there's any point in getting super stressed about something you can't change, and it ain't changing. I don't see how in the future it's going to become easier to monetize music. You know, I'm pretty sure I read an article where Tom York said that he did the maths, and let's say it's a 4-piece, just a straight regular 4-piece band.
Yeah.
If you release an album of 10 tunes as a 4-piece band and put it on Spotify, in order to get each one of the 4 members to make minimum wage per month, you need 5 million listens of the entire album to make minimum wage.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not talking about 30, 40 years ago here. I'm talking about like the Oasis time we were talking about earlier. If you sold 5 million albums, you were set for life. Now, if you can get 5 million plays on Spotify, minimum wage.
I know it's slightly more pop, but I remember Graham Coxon talking about where, you know, he had his little nervous, but he had his little nervous breakdown, that's so condescending. He had a nervous breakdown during the Great Escape tour, and basically when he came back, he kind of not quite seized control of the band, but he was like, we're stopping with all this Britpop stuff. I'm into Pavement, I'm into Sebado, I'm into the Dinosaur Jr. We're going in that direction, everyone cool with that. And he described it, the process, as unlearning the guitar.
Yeah, big time. I think you can fall into traps. You can fall into the trap of this, like, we're working on a song, and this is less of a Punch Face thing and more of a Not Monsters thing, actually, where because it's a different role in that you're trying to find pockets of space around the vocal.
Yeah.
And it's slightly more conventional, straight up band, you know, a traditional 4-piece rock band.
Yeah.
You can fall into traps where you find yourself doing what most guitar players would do. It's like, what am I going to do in this part? And you just and then, like, in practice, when you're working on something, you take a step back from it and go, oh man, I'm totally just doing what anyone would do in this situation. I need to immediately stop doing that and come at it completely from a different angle. And I don't know what that angle is yet, but I just need to find it, because I don't want to play this blues lick over your chord sequence. You know, like, you hear a 4-chord sequence and you immediately start playing bluesy lead lines over it, and it's like, no, I don't want to do that. And it's fine if people are into that, but it's just not me. For years, Aristocrat would be a good example of, you know, we wrote rock music that we liked, but there was always in our heads when we were working on it, it was always do you think people will like this, or maybe we should do this because people seem to be into that. And it wasn't super dark and cynical by any means. We enjoyed it and we really liked the stuff we did. Yeah. But there was always a little bit of write what we think people want to hear. Yeah. And that's bullshit, man. That's my fault, not the other members of the band, because I was the writer. I was writing all the songs. So that was my fault completely. And with Punchface, after, you know, when we started playing, very much so, like the band started with me and Jacob just having a jam for fun with no intention of trying to form a band.
Yeah.
But once it started to become a band, the biggest thing was, let's just write music we like. And if no one likes it, fine. Obviously we want people to like it, but let's not in any way change what we're doing to try and second guess ourselves into making people like it. Let's just write the music we really dig. Yeah. And hopefully people will like it. But let's not overthink it, you know? Yeah. And it wasn't supposed to be an instrumental band. There was no supposed to about it. Mm-hmm. It was just start playing music together for fun. And then it became, okay, maybe this is a band. And then it was let's just work on music. I was like, because of the way I'd done things before, and I guess I wanted to do things a little differently. So I was like, that, you know, but this is before Steve even joined the band. So in the very early stages, it was still like Aristocrat in that I was writing all the music. Yeah. And my whole thing was, I'm just going to come in with these riffs. We'll figure out what the drums should be doing. We'll figure out what the bass should be doing, and we'll play them. Once we kind of have that down and we're happy with how it's going, then I'll start thinking about lyrics. I don't want worrying about how I'm going to sing and play this to influence the writing of it, because that definitely happened in the past. It was like, I have this cool riff, but I need to dumb it down a little bit so I can sing it. And I was like, no, we're going to learn how to play this. We're going to play it well, and when it gets to a point where it's ready, then I'll go back and think about the vocal. And we got to a point where we had 3 or 4 tunes, and kind of, I think just one night I was just like, do we really need to have vocals on this? Is there really a rule that says it has to have a vocal? Because I'm really enjoying it the way it is. So it wasn't like, let's start an instrumental rock band. It was, let's just start a band that ended up not having a vocal, and then working almost backwards, because I guess there was spaces being left going, well, I'm sure the vocal will sort that out. Yeah. And then when we realized we weren't going to have one, we were like, well, we maybe need to go back and look at that because it's a bit too straight up. Yeah. And then is that where some of the kind of messing around with time signatures and stuff? Yeah, that's when what I said before, the how can we fuck with it? Yeah. Because that's what it was. It was like, so you have this tune and it's pretty rocking, but it's all fairly straight and 4/4 because we think later on I'm going to add a vocal to that. And then when we realize we're not going to add a vocal to it, we're like, okay, we maybe need to fuck with this a bit because it's a bit too song without vocal as opposed to song that never, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's the difference between an instrumental piece of music and something that just sounds like it's missing the lyric, you know? And we certainly didn't want that. And we've got better at that as well. Like, you know, when we play the really old stuff now compared to the newer stuff, we're like, man, it still does sound like you could just add a vocal to that. Whereas now there's no way you could do it to most of that stuff. With the songs, it's still yourself and Steve are bringing in most of the starting points, I think. Well, historically, it more often than not would be me coming in with the start of something. Yeah. And I think for mostly the reason for that is I work in a guitar shop, so I get time to play guitar during the day. Right. And I'll walk in, and sometimes it could be, hey guys, an hour ago I was in work and I came up with this riff. What do you think? So I would say, you know, initially it was probably maybe 70% me coming up with the start of things. Now that's just the start. Like, they're not songs until the guys get hold of them. Now it's definitely probably pretty level between me and Steve, and to be fair, Des has started to come in with some really cool stuff as well. Like, there's definitely one of the tunes on the new EP that we're working on is like fundamentally him. Yeah. I think all three of us contribute in terms of starting a thing, and all 4 of us, like, the songs wouldn't sound the way they are unless all 4 of us had an impact on them. Yeah, definitely. How do you know when a song's finished on your side of things? They fucking never are. Yeah. I guess, honestly, I think the only way we really can say a song is finished is when we've recorded it. Yeah. Because then it's like, we can't fuck with this anymore because it's out. Yeah. You know, like, you can't change it once it's out. We try things loads of different ways. You know, it's like, if we have kind of, say, we've got parts of songs and we've got 3 or 4 parts in the song, and we try them in different orders and we try them in different not so much time signatures, but like let's double time that now, let's half time it and let's see how that sounds, and then maybe drop one instrument out. That doesn't work, try something else. So we play the absolute tits out of every song before it's a song.
Yeah.
And like there's definitely plenty of songs we've gigged quite a few times and then completely torn apart. And started again with, or ditched, or changed, or whatever. But yeah, as I said, I reckon really they're only ever properly finished when we release them.
Thanks so much to Dave Newell for talking to us today. If you enjoyed the show, go tell someone, just one person, in real life, online, whatever you like. The more people that know about us, the more shows we can make. The show was produced and edited by Dave Cantan and presented by me, Noël Duplaa. Thank you for listening to The Arteries.
Learned how to be honest with myself. It was little to no help. I lost some friends, I lost some family. Like car windows swapping scenery, I think I may have started losing days. 'Cause they tend to blend together and fade, and meaning's getting harder to pin down. 'Cause it's we were bored, we're just whores now. And he said that I am dead to her. All my friends are in America. I think I caught a bullet in my teeth, and I had to imitate relief. I'll keep my clever speeches to myself, 'cause these swords won't fall upon themselves, and this is clear.